Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for downloading this, and you download it, and hopefully you're going to listen to it. I don't know. You might just want to download it and then walk away. I don't know. How are you doing? You doing good? I hope you are. I am. I'm not gonna burden you. How's this? I'm not gonna burn you with the peek behind the curtain today. Nope. Just going to do this podcast. I'm going to share information about our guest, and I'm going to leave it at that. Not going to bring personal information because I don't want to bum you out. Anyway, a little bit of house cleaning. I guess house cleaning. I don't know. Hey, please go over to the website, mydadsadvicebook.com. Pick up your pre-order of the new book, My Dad's Advice, at 5:04 a.m. Again, the website is mydadsadvicebook.com. Pre-order, please. What else is going on? So I've been toying with this, and maybe by the time this podcast has already come out, I have created a Facebook group. As much as I am not a fan of Facebook, the only reason why I ever came back to Facebook was because of my business coach, Mr. Glenn P. Brooks Jr. You know what? I better put him in the show notes. Let me write that down. Add Glenn to show notes. Okay, there we go. So that's the only reason why I'm on Facebook. And I guess I don't mention this enough. I mean, Blending the Family has a Facebook page. So go to Blending the Family. I think I've got like 2 people that follow it or like it. I don't know. I'm a LinkedIn person. I love LinkedIn. Oh, and you can find me there too at The Tommy Maloney. Seriously, The Tommy Maloney on LinkedIn. So I am, wanting to start a Facebook group for bonus dads. I'm in 2 men's groups, and I get so much out of it. I feel that maybe I need to step up to the plate and kick that winning field goal. That was a joke. Anyway. And also, I will be adding to the website. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, the website's done. And I am going to add group coaching to my repertoire. All right, so we talked about the new book, possibly a new Facebook group. I'm toying around with, I guess the word of the day is toying around, or the words. And I went on, this is really cool. Here's some business info for you. If you're trying to build a business and you don't know what to name it, one way to figure this out is go to Spotify. Spotify has a business generator. So I typed in bonus dads and came up with a few suggestions from Spotify's business generator, business name generator. And I'm liking one of them. So go to Spotify, type in a word or two, and it will generate a business name for you. You don't have to, like them all, but you can bounce around ideas. So that was what I did for this potential new Facebook group. What else is going on? So I'm recording this before the big trip, the big college campus tour trip. And you'll have to check it out. I don't know how we can go back in the past. I am just losing it. I know I'm losing it. But anyway, my son Connor and I are doing a guy's trip, and I'm excited about this because I went to a small school up in Minnesota called Winona State. Had way too much fun. Didn't study. I wish I had. I think that's when I should have realized college was just not for me. Shouldn't have wasted the parents' money. And I apologize to my mom and dad for wasting your money on that. And then going to another college, and I ran out of money because I was paying for it. And so anyway, I'm excited. We're taking this trip, and then we're going to take a trip within a trip. We're going to spend a few days in my hometown of Chicago. Going to have some Chicago pizza. I was telling that to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine named Miguel, and Miguel's like, New York pizza's better. And I'm like, whatever. Chicago pizza, this little bomb.com, as the kids probably don't say anymore. But anyway, looking forward to this because when I went to Winona State, my dad took me to go visit the campus. And it was luckily because of him, he found a place for me to stay. He's just a great connector, networker, salesperson. And so, again, because of him, I was able to land a place off campus. And Connor's going to be staying in the dorm, so for now, I don't know what he's going to do after that. But I'm excited. I can't tell you what this means to me because the fact that he's going away, he's going several states away, is going to be, I don't know how a lot of you parents do it. I don't know how my wife Ann did it with her oldest daughter. But I'm going to have to live and learn. I'm going to have to just let him just fly his wings. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say. I'm nervous about this trip because this is a new milestone. And yeah, so I would love to hear from you. Tommy at blendingthefamily.com. Tommy at blendingthefamily.com. Let me know how you handled it when your kids went away to college and they were far, far away. All right, on this episode is Justin Goldman. And let me bring up his LinkedIn because, gosh, he does so much. Let me just scroll up. Well, here we go. Justin Goldman. He's an advisor. He's a consultant, director, founder, mentor, author. He's written 5 books. His newest book, The Power Within 2, came out January of 2021. He is somebody that I can really relate to, and that is he is what's called an NHL. Yes, we're talking hockey, folks. Emergency backup goalie. And he'll talk about that. And you'll get to hear my story many back in the 90s when I was an emergency backup goalie, other known as being an e-bug emergency backup goalie. Get it? E-bug? Yeah. Anyway, Justin and I had, this was a conversation I've wanted to have with him for a long time. And it turns out it was almost 4 years ago when we tried to do it the first time, but we had internet issues. But things we talk about on this episode is my prediction was wrong. Especially after last night. My prediction was way wrong. Gosh, I can't believe it. But anyway, I will probably be, I'll just say this right now, at the time of this recording, I'm probably going to jump on the Montreal Canadiens bandwagon. Probably. Justin also, without knowing it, validated how we end this podcast with my quote from Terry Crews, "Your success is my success." And Justin tells a story that, again, really proves how cheering on somebody else, even if it's somebody you don't like, cheering on somebody else and what that can mean to that person who's doing the cheering. How do you become an elite performer? I know this podcast or this episode is going to talk. The foundation is hockey, but you're going to hear a lot of great information from Justin talking about how to be an elite performer, mental toughness. We talk a lot about mental fortitude. So, Justin Goldman, you can find him out on LinkedIn, and his information will be in the show notes. But again, this is a conversation I've wanted to have for a long time because of the mental aspect of not just sports, but again, we can take a lot of information that Justin talks about and put it into parenting. We can put it into the business world. We can even put it into how to train your dragon. Okay. I'm excited sharing this. I'm always excited about sharing the guests on this podcast. Without the guests, I don't think I don't think you'd listen. I really don't. And I only bring that up, and this is not an ego thing. This is conversations I've had with other people. I mean, even a few years ago, my wife Ann and I were at a charity event, and I ran somebody I know that listens to the podcast, and he's like, "You don't need all the guests. I think that you can still do the podcast without them." And I'm like, it's a crutch. For me, it's a crutch. I love talking to people. I love showcasing and spotlighting. And we've got some upcoming podcast episodes with just some great people. So there you go. All right. So again, Justin Goldman is our guest on this episode of the podcast, and I hope you get something out of it. I did. I really did, especially a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. The way I end the guest interviews, let me grab the other notebook. For 2021, the question to them is, if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked that I did not ask? And I get some great answers. And Justin, I was mind blown by what his response to that, and I would highly recommend taking notes. A lot of things he said, including how he answered that question, because you could use this as a parent. You could use this in a business interview. So let's say you're hiring somebody. This could be something you could use to find out a little bit more about the person you're interviewing with. Or even maybe you're at a dinner party or a lunch and learn. This question, what Justin, how he turned it around was just brilliant. So thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. I know I talk way too much, and I apologize. But that's who I am, and I really needed to talk right now because I'm under a little bit of stress. And again, sorry, just gonna leave it at that. All right, validation. Thank you, Justin. You validated why I use this quote from Terry Crews, and that's how we're going to end it. Justin Goldman, thank you. Here we go. As Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Justin, it's been too long, and I'm so happy that we were able to finally, it's been years. It's been years since we tried it the first time. I think you had just moved into a new place.
Yeah.
When we tried recording this the first time. So how is the place?
Well, the place no longer exists because that was back when my wife was still living in Finland and we were dealing with the whole green card process. And that was already, at least 4 years ago. So
Wow.
that place no longer exists. We live in an awesome house in Castle Rock, Colorado, which is about 30 minutes south of Denver. And yeah, everything's great. The green card process is thankfully over. We don't have to worry about that nonsense anymore. And yeah, we're doing great down here. And obviously, it's been a very challenging year for myself personally, but otherwise, everything's been going great.
Yeah, I want to start off because you can understand where I'm coming from. You can relate to this. And I know the listeners are going, oh God, are we going to talk hockey? Yes, we're talking hockey. The greatest sport on earth. I'm sorry. I am going to put it out there. So I know you have I don't know what to call it. It's I guess a part-time job with the Colorado Avalanche as an emergency backup goalie. Here's my story, Justin. Way before the NHL had uh, the that position, back in sometime in the 1990s, I was living outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and we had a team, the East Coast Hockey League team of the Nashville Knights, which were a farm team to at the time Tampa Bay Lightning. And I got a call one night from the head coach of the Nashville Knights saying, "We need an emergency goalie. You need to get your butt down here now." I'm like, okay. So driving from my apartment down to Nashville was about a 40-minute drive. However, it was in a blizzard. I couldn't believe
Jeez.
it. Tennessee got hit with snow. And what had happened, Justin, was the visiting team, uh, where were they? The Bulls. I think they're the Birmingham Bulls. Anyway, their top goalie got bumped up to the AHL, and so they had no backup goalie
Right.
for the. So anyway, long story short, so I drive down Nashville, have all my gear, and the sad thing is, this is way before social media. This is way before selfies. This is way before the internet really blossomed. So all it is right now, Justin, is a story. For a while, it was on my resume as an emergency backup goalie, and so, but but you were on TV to talk about it. So I'm jealous of that aspect because, I think I could have been a great story too. Here's some dumb radio DJ being called to go be an emergency goalie for a professional team. But I still think what you do, and just the thought. I mean, talk about the mental thought of sitting in what it's now, what, Ball Arena.
Ball
um
Arena, yeah. No more
yeah,
Pepsi Center, which
no
is
more.
really, really weird.
It is weird to say that, but just sitting there, and I mean, we've seen it. We've seen, the past 2 years at least, we've seen the emergency backup goalie get called.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's that? I mean, what's that like, sitting there watching, and you really do have to prepare yourself. I mean, because again, we've seen it, so you really have to prepare yourself. So can talk about your how you prepare from time you leave your house to the time you know are sitting in the arena.
Yeah, it's definitely a very surreal experience. And I say surreal because it's one of those things where, maybe you imagine it when you're a little kid and you're like, okay, I would love to just sit on the bench for an NHL team or put on the jersey and somehow magically I get in a game, right? Like it's something you dream about, it's something you daydream about. And you daydream about it because the odds of it actually happening are basically zero. And then you get older and you realize what's fantasy and what's reality. And I got this position, this opportunity to be an emergency backup goalie for the Avalanche when I was 35. So um pretty much at the tail end of my quote unquote prime as a as a competitive goalie. And all of a sudden this opportunity gets dropped on my lap literally out of nowhere. It wasn't something I was expecting or aiming for or training for. It was a new rule that the NHL put into place at the beginning of the 2017 season, and it was literally a phone call from someone at the Avalanche organization asking for help to determine who the emergency backup goalies would be. So even when I first got the call, it wasn't like, we want you to be an e-bug. It was, can you help us find e-bugs? And it just so happened that I met the requirements and barely by the skin of my teeth was able to claim one of the roles. There's actually 5 emergency backup goalies here in Colorado that share the duties during the season. So that experience alone was just kind of super surreal because it's not something you expect. It's not something that ever existed beforehand. It literally came out of nowhere. But obviously, you are just so grateful for the opportunity. You jump on it. And that's exactly what I did. And everything changes. All of a sudden, you do have to take your day to day routines a little bit more seriously. You do have to take your beer league games a little bit more seriously. It's not like I'm still playing juniors where I'm on the ice 5 days a week and I get to play against other great athletes. You have to find a way to keep yourself prepared mentally and physically with what you have around you, which is basically private skates and beer league. So that was really the challenge for me. It wasn't necessarily something where I was dealing with nerves or a lack of confidence. Like, I definitely feel like with all of my time spent, studying pro goalies and working with pro goalie coaches, I feel very confident that if the situation were to arise, which, the odds are 0.001%, it's like winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning. If I did have to go in there, I could stand there and have some pucks hit me. And know that, the team around me would rally and not allow a shot on goal like they did for, David Ayers and Scott Foster. They made some
Right.
saves, but it wasn't, full 60 minutes. Really, it's just, how do I make sure I'm ready if, God forbid, this actually does happen, right? And so that was always the challenge. And for me, just every day, it's knowing that this is something that could happen and you have to be ready. And it's great because it helped me develop some good atomic habits, some good small habits that have made me healthier and just a better person overall, from like not eating so much greasy food to, taking the time I'm on the ice a little bit more seriously and not taking it for granted, to just little things like stretching at home when I'm watching TV with my wife, right? Like, that's something I just never did before. And now I do it. And so it's actually developed some good, holistic habits for just everyday life. And for that, I'm really, really grateful, beyond just the experience of going to the rink early and dropping the gear off in the Avs locker room and seeing the guys, kick the soccer ball around before they get dressed and stuff. Like, that's kind of icing on the cake for something that is truly a surreal experience.
What about your mental approach? You talk about stretching, you talk about your nutrition, but what about your mental approach? Because again, like you said, Scott Foster, David Ayers, David Ayers for Carolina, Scott Foster for Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, you really do have to treat it as, again, there's a good chance, regardless of the percentage, there's a good chance. So how's your mental game change because of this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I keep in mind is something that I learned from a lot of rookie goalies that get thrown into a big NHL game, whether it's like, Jake Ottinger, for example, last season as a rookie, with very few NHL games experience, gets thrown into a playoff game, right? And you hear this quote very often, and it's a great one because I think it's the exact mindset that every emergency backup goalie has is, we're used to playing a very subpar level. It's not pro level, it's beer league level, or, it could be fairly competitive, adult league play versus the NHL. Like, you can't get any wider of a gap, right? Like, there's no bigger leap that you can take going from competitive beer league to an NHL game, right? But at the end of the day, it's still the game of hockey. It's the same game. It's just way faster and against way better players. But the essence of being a goalie is still the same, and I think that's something that every e-bug leans on, is that okay, things are going to happen faster, but you know what? There's also going to be a lot more structure to the game being played, because in beer league, everyone is kind of in a different spot. There's no real cohesiveness. It's not super structured. At least if you get thrown into an NHL game, you know where guys are going to be, because it's such a high level of play. So that is what helps me mentally when I go to the rink. I always remind myself, like, there's nothing you can do to control what will happen. You are subject to um, the experience of a hockey game, and anything can happen in the game of hockey. So there's the realization that you have no control over whether or not you get the call or whether or not another goalie gets hurt. But if, God forbid, you do have to go into an actual game, which is the rarest of all rare things that could happen, it's still the game of hockey. It's the same game I've been playing for 25 years. The goal is the same, which is to set my feet and be square to the puck. And most importantly, if you do get that chance, you are one of the luckiest SOBs in the world, because it's literally happened to less than 5 people on this planet. So no matter what happens, if you look like a fool or you fall on your face or you give up a goal on every shot, still appreciate the opportunity that you got, because very few people in the world have ever gotten a chance to experience that.
Well, you bring up an excellent point, and I am such a fan of Stoic philosophy. And you're talking about things that you can and cannot control, and that's part of the Stoic philosophy is focus on what you can control. Um, I just saw this today. The single most important practice in Stoic philosophy is differentiating between what we can change and what we can't, what we have influence over and what we do not. And you know, we can sit here and use that as a part of a sports analogy, but it's also about our daily life. There are certain things that we can control, and there's certain things that we cannot control. As one of the things I always say to my son when back in the day when I was coaching him is, let the game come to you. You know, mentally you want to try and slow it down so you can visualize what is going on. And so one of the things I find fascinating is with what you're doing, Justin, is it's not just about the, like you were saying, being square to the shooter, making sure, your feet are planted, and make sure you're shuffling, make sure, you know, make sure you've got your skates sharpened, make sure your stick isn't broken. But it's more of that. It's the mental aspect. And I remember, I vividly remember one of first games my son was in net. First period ends, he comes skating to the bench, and I look inside his helmet and I can see he's crying. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Are you okay? Did you get hurt? He goes, no, I let in a goal. I'm like, dude, we got 2 more periods to go. You've got to, relax and understand. And one of my personal philosophies with him and other kids I coached was, at the end of the day, nobody's going to die. You let in, 1 goal, you let in 7 goals. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to die. And so
Mm-hmm.
with what you're doing in between the 5 books you've written, and I say that because I'm jealous. I feel like a slacker, but there is so much to, and I want to just dumb it down to youth sports, that it's not just about the physical fitness, but it is a mental. And yeah, I'm going to be biased and say it's more mental on a goalie, especially as you're well aware. I mean, especially now as we're talking, we're in the NHL playoffs, and so as a goalie, you you have to be like a duck and let the water roll off. You let a goal in, you got to move on. And so what mental tricks from other professional goalies have you learned that you were able to share with others and also helped you with your game?
Well, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the books that I've written and co-authored with Mike Valley, former goalie coach for the Dallas Stars, is that every single pro goalie has different strategies that they've learned through their experiences, what works and what doesn't for them. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, not just goaltending, but being an athlete in any sport, is that you may play the same position as someone else. There might be, two defensemen and three forwards on the ice, but at the end of the day, how you perceive the game and how you process and how you manage the emotions of playing, a competitive sport is what makes you unique as a mental warrior. Everyone's got the ability to achieve greatness inside of them. It's just a matter of having the confidence, knowing that you have the capacity and you have the ability. So honestly, I've learned I learn strategies from everyone I talk to, whether they're a pro goalie or a beer league goalie or a youth goalie, even, because everyone experiences the game a little bit differently. And because we all experience things differently, we all have different challenges. Some goalies are able to let goals roll off their shoulders very easily. They could care less. They have the Carey Price mentality where they are just always focused on the next shot. Other goalies have incredible ability to compete, but because they're so ultra competitive, they do take goals against really, really hard, and that does set them back. So everyone has different capacities and different skills. And part of the journey of, becoming an elite performer, or, rising to the top of your abilities and being the best version of yourself, is finding out what works and what doesn't. And I think that's something that always stuck in my mind when I was younger. Like, one of the reasons why I was able to turn goaltending or hockey into a career is because I just took everything as a learning experience. Like, I didn't have the ultra fierce competitiveness that I needed to be a college or a pro goalie. But what I did have was this ability to see everything as an opportunity to get better. And so when I gave up a goal, I actually was okay with it, because I was like, well, you know what? That's a chance for me to learn what I did wrong, and I'm going to make sure I don't do it again. Of course, I did it again, because that's the reality of, being a goalie too, is you give up a lot of goals. Like, that's, and I was always very realistic with the experience of being a goalie. You know what, Justin, you're going to give up goals. That is the nature of hockey. Doesn't matter how good you feel or how dialed in you are or how many things you did right leading up to the puck dropping. You know what? You're at the mercy of the game, and hockey is a crazy game. Pucks do weird things, and you're going to give up goals, and that's totally okay. So that was my kind of um, area of elite performance, was my ability to embrace the faults, embrace the mistakes, embrace the losses, embrace the negative stuff that happened, and realize that it's still going to make me better. Now, again, some goalies are really good at that, and some goalies are really bad at that. But that's, again, the beauty of being an athlete or being any person who's in a competitive field, is that the more that you share these things, the more that you have these conversations about mental performance, the more you learn, and the more you can try to, fill in the gaps where you feel like you struggle. And it takes that honest approach and that, growth mindset to, become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I emulated Ken Dryden when I was playing, because Ken Dryden, after he gave up a goal, he would do that stand within the crease, lean on his stick, and just stare at the other goalie. And that's how he would reset himself. And I learned from, I think it was Corey Crawford, the former Blackhawks goalie,
Mm-hmm.
that his mantra was next shot, next save after he gave up a goal. So I would take, the Ken Dryden approach with my son and say, just go reset yourself. And you'll see that from at many different levels of goaltending, where a goalie gives up a goal, and what do? They skate to the boards and then skate back. That's how they reset. Um, uh, who is it? Braden Holby. He'll do the water bottle, where he'll take the water bottle, squirt water, watch the droplets, and that's how he would reset himself. And so, there are different ways, and I think when I'm listening to you talk, Justin, I see so many things that people in it doesn't have to be sports, but how do you, let's say you're in marketing and you lose a client. Well, how do you, reset yourself, and how do you come back from that? Well, you just maybe go take a time out, go for a walk. It's, again, it goes back to the mental aspect of it. I want to ask you this because before we hit record, I was telling you that I don't know if I'm a typical goalie dad or a atypical goalie dad. I don't know where I fit in. I really don't want to fit in. But as a goalie dad, our philosophy is whenever our kids let up a goal, we always feel all the other parents are looking at you because it's your fault.
Mm.
Your kid just let up a goal. And so, what I have done for many, many years when I stepped away from coaching was I don't sit by parents. I find a spot where I can just be alone, and I don't know, and maybe this is going to be a conversation. I feel like I'm back in therapy with you, Justin. So thank you. So I think maybe this is a conversation I'm going to have with my son
Mhm.
next week when we're out of town together. How can you help goalie parents with the mental aspect of that position? So, what I'm asking is, do you have any tips that you can share with our parents to say, all right, we understand it's not just a physical sport position, there's a mental aspect of it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I think for any parent, it's extreme. For any parent of a goalie or any athlete, you have to start with empathy. You
Oh,
really
beautiful.
need to try and understand what it's like to be in the crease. Um, you need to try and understand what it feels like to know that you're all alone out there and that you are the last line of defense. And I love the phrase last line of defense because I think that helps parents understand. Because I think as a parent, you feel that way a lot of times as well. You are the last barrier between something happening to your child and not happening, right? Like you feel that when they're little babies and they can't defend themselves or they can't walk on their own. Like you are the only one that is there helping them. They cannot thrive without you. And that's kind of what it's like being a goalie. Like your team will not survive if you do not stand there and try to stop pucks, right? So I think for any parent, whether they have hockey experience or not, just talk to your son or daughter about what it feels like to be the last line of defense, because there is where you will find some common ground. And once you find some common ground, it will become so much easier to have like valuable, like meaningful conversations with your goalie son or daughter. And as soon as you can have meaningful conversations, I think that will really help, because it's not like you have to be a goalie expert and understand RVH and angles and positioning and all these other technical terms. um that's not what I think a young goalie is looking for. A young goalie is looking for compassion and understanding and empathy. They just want to know that you understand a little bit of how hard it can be, emotionally and mentally on them. And once you have a little bit of compassion and you kind of just try not to be ultra competitive. I know that's a natural instinct. You want your goalie to be the best. Look, the reality is that goaltending is a flawed position. Like, if you don't look good, you're not going to look good. You're going to look foolish. You're going to look silly. You're going to look really bad. That's just the inherent nature of the position. And we all experience it. every goalie, even the greatest goalies in the world, looked like crap when they first learned how to put the gear on, right? Like it's a very awkward position. It feels very cumbersome. You're wearing all this gear. It's hard to skate. So everyone goes through it. And it's only the goalies that are truly driven and are truly supported, um, or at least not forced to be ultra competitive too soon, that are able to kind of thrive and push through it because they're just having fun. So I think at the end of the day, it's like be empathetic, try to understand what it means to be the last line of defense, and then just never put so much pressure on your son or daughter that they start to hate playing the game that they love. And a lot of these NHL goalies that I talk to, it's so funny. It's like I look for patterns in what makes them good and where the essence of their abilities to become elite come from. And a lot of it, they all say the same thing. My parents were never really hard on me. They just wanted me to have fun. They never forced me to be a goalie. They never expected me to be great. They never put this much pressure on me. They just let me play, and they appreciated the fact that I had fun. So I know that's a little bit cliche, that part, but it's so true. Like you can't add additional pressure to what they're already facing. And if you don't know what kind of pressure they're already facing, you're not going to know when to dial it back as a parent. So that's mostly just, again, empathy and awareness. And we're seeing that, all over the world now. We're starting to hear this term empathy more and more. And I'm so glad that we are, because it's so true. You talk about diversity and inclusiveness and all these other really important elements of, living in a society that we're living in now. And it really just comes down to, can you at least take a moment to try and understand what someone else is experiencing? And because goaltending is so foreign, I don't think a lot of parents really truly take the time to try and understand what it's like to be a goalie. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where it starts and ends for me.
And if you don't understand, go put the gear on. Go
Dude,
be.
you know what? You know what's so amazing about that now is that with the technology and virtual reality, wearing an Oculus headset and the Sense Arena program, parents can feel what it's like to be a goalie without having to actually go out on the ice and do it. They can throw on a VR headset and do the Sense Arena program for 10 minutes, and every parent's going to be like, "Holy crap, this is way harder than I ever imagined." It kind of looks easy when you watch it on TV because you're watching the best of the best do it, and there's a lot of flow, and like it's really seamless. But man, it's such a different world when you actually try it and experience it for yourself.
I don't know. You gotta have the smell. You gotta have the
Yeah.
the inside the helmet smell, the pads. I mean, I always remember my mom was like, "Ugh, leave your gear outside. Just leave your gear." I'm like, no, it might get stolen. She'd be like,
Yeah,
That's okay."
that's funny. That's very true. I think parents that have experienced the game before also struggle. Goalies that have goalie dads or goalie moms, that can be difficult too, because there are certain expectations that are set. And so I think that's part of it too, is what expectations do you have in your mind as a parent for your goalie son or daughter? Are you expecting them to win every game? If so, that's not realistic, and that's going to bleed into the goalie, him or herself, and that's not good either. You have to make sure that you manage the expectations around what the goal is, and what the end game is. And if this goalie, this imaginary goalie we're talking about, is under 10 years old, man, it should just be about having fun and being with your buddies, and don't worry about the expectations or the end goal or the end game until they're at least a teenager.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about hating the sport. If it's not fun. I remember. I can't remember. I think it was when I was going through my level 2 coaching through USA Hockey, and one of the statistics they said was at the age of 10 is where a lot of kids leave the sport because they're not having fun. There is too much pressure, both from the parents and coaching. And one of the biggest life lessons I learned was, you hear and read about, love languages. Well, as parents and as coaches, you need to understand your players and your kids' communication language. So when I was coaching, I had to figure out. through through a lot of errors, if my son gave up, a bad goal and he would come to the bench, I need to understand how can I communicate with him without him having an emotional breakdown right there on the ice. And one of the things I learned because of that was just staying calm, just staying calm. And, I do have empathy because I did play, but not, I didn't start playing until just after high school. So I really couldn't relate to the youth aspect of it, but I could still understand, when you give up a goal, you give up a goal. How do we move on from that? And I feel that we do, we do have both ugly parents and ugly coaches, not just in hockey. I mean, we've seen the ugliness of youth sports. My point here is, just understanding, how do you talk to your son or daughter? How do you talk to your players? What is their communication style? Can you, not scream at them, but give them, a little bit of a rough voice to spark them? Or are they the type that you just need to have an even keel and be able to just, without a lot of words, just explain to them how they can improve?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think again, whether you're a coach or you're a parent or you're kind of a hybrid in between, I think it all starts with trying to find a common ground of understanding, and starting from a play, and that starts from being genuine with what you're trying to learn about your son or daughter. Um, and I think, again, I always think about it. I don't have kids yet. I'm not a parent yet, but I always think about my experience growing up and how my parents treated me when it came to the sports stuff. Like, they genuinely just wanted to understand what I was going through. They didn't care about um, trying to teach me a lesson or instilling a certain attitude or character trait in me. I think that happened naturally. But when it came to sports and performance, they just genuinely wanted to understand what I was going through, and they just wanted me to open up. They wanted me to know it was okay to tell them that I felt like crap, or vice versa. And I think because I knew my parents were just like genuinely trying to understand, because hockey was a foreign sport to them. Like, I'm the first in my family lineage to ever be an ice hockey player or be a goalie. So a lot of it was just them wanting to genuinely understand. And I recognized that. And I knew that I wasn't going to get reprimanded, or they weren't disappointed in me. I think one thing that you experience with a lot of young goalies is that when they give up a goal or lose a game, they're so young that they think that when they've given up a goal, that when they do something wrong, that there's something wrong with themselves as a human being, like as an actual person. And when parents react negatively, they internalize that as if there's something wrong with their being. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if there's actually something wrong with them as
Right.
humans. But it's hard as a parent to make sure and distinguish that, no, 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 you didn't do something like, I'm not upset with you as a son or a daughter. I'm upset because I want the best for you. I just want you to have success. But again, a lot of our reactions don't necessarily take that into consideration. And that's why, again, it goes back to empathy and understanding. If your son gives up a goal and you react to, like, you throw some paper in there, you throw your coffee or whatever, like, that young goalie is going to think that there is something wrong with them internally. And that's the last thing we really want. But again, young kids don't understand. They can't make that distinguishment, especially in the moment when they're just trying to play a hockey game. So I think that's really important too, is to realize that when you do something wrong as a kid, sometimes you think there's something wrong with you. And we know as adults that's not the case. But our reactions don't, and our first instinct as a parent doesn't always take that into consideration. So that's really important for goalies, because again, when you give up a goal, all of the eyes are on you. Everyone's watching you, and everyone sees the same thing. This kid did something wrong, or this kid isn't living up to expectations. And that's not something a kid should have to deal with at that age, right? Again, it's supposed to be about fun and learning and just enjoying the experience. But again, that's something that's out of control. Like, that's part of the genetic makeup of being a goalie, is that you're going to have to accept those experiences and accept the fact that you are flawed and not, a perfect athlete. And so again, that's part of the plight of being a goalie, and why, goalies are so resilient and so gritty, and so fiercely determined. And certainly that bleeds into everyday life. You see a lot of goalies that go on to have really successful careers in other areas because they're so conditioned to overcome a lot of the negative things emotionally that happen when you fail or when you make a mistake. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but uh, really just being genuinely interested in what it's like to experience the goaltending position, I think, is really what helps a goalie as a child bring their guard down and actually open up about the frustrations or the anger or the disappointment that they may be feeling. And as soon as that happens, it's so much easier to get over it. And you learn so much about your child throughout that process.
Oh my gosh, you bring up an excellent point, and I'm really excited about this. And that was um, just a few months ago when my son was in finishing up his U18 career here in Colorado. The team was in I think it was semifinals, and the game was getting ready to go into overtime, and the referees were talking amongst themselves. I think they were just, talking as far as making sure they had the rules right, the time, how many minutes on the clock, things like that. And I took a picture of my son. He comes out of the net and he has everybody on the ice. So the five other skaters in front of him huddle up and making sure they were all on the same page, that they were, number one, making sure that, they were doing what got them there. And it was a proud daddy moment that here he is, and, you know, letting his other teammates know that we're going to have fun, but, you know, let's go out and win. And so I my struggle for my struggle now is that, as I told you before we start recording, is my son is going off to college, and my my internal struggle is that, did I do enough? Did I, am I good enough, or have I been a good enough dad? And when you see that, you want to take, as a dad, as a parent, you want to take a little bit of credit, but at the same time, you're watching your kids grow right in front of your eyes and seeing leadership in action. Actually, that's what I titled I wrote a piece called "Leadership in Action."
Mm-hmm.
And when you see your kids step up like that, and you take a step back and you go, "How beautiful!" It's just a beautiful moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, for me, again, not being a parent, but working with kids all my life and having such a close relationship with my dad, a lot of the lessons my dad taught me, I didn't learn until I was in my 30s. Like I'm one of those kids, I guess, that had to learn the lessons the hard way. And that would cause a lot of frustration with my parents. But eventually I figured it out, and it definitely took me longer than probably the average person. But I think my dad was really resilient as a parent as well, and realized that, what, like, he's going to have to learn this lesson the hard way again and again and again, over and over again. And it takes a lot of persistence. I can only imagine the persistence it takes as a goalie dad, working with the kid to try and teach those lessons. And it's like, there's so many opportunities to show that you've learned the lesson, but it doesn't always happen. But eventually you just, you kind of like hope that eventually they figure it out. And that's how it was
Right.
for me. Like I finally figured it out in my late 20s, early 30s. And then, my relationship with my father changed drastically and became a lot more, um, it wasn't just about, the success and the progress and everything like that. It was much more emotional based, I would say. Um, so yeah, I can only imagine the frustrations that come along with that when you try to instill these things in your kids and they continually don't showcase it, but eventually they will, I'm sure. So
You hope. You really do
yeah,
hope. And when you do become a dad, if you need any advice, I'm here for you, Justin.
I'll be listening to this podcast for sure.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about is again the mental aspect, and I know we're going to be talking at a very high level. And what I mean by that is, two NHL goalies in a situation that happened this past weekend. Robin Lehner is one of my all-time favorite goalies, and I'm not just saying that because he played for the Blackhawks, but when he was playing for the New York Islanders, he came out to the public and to the press saying he was struggling mentally. And I mean, when you hear that from a professional athlete, that they have their own struggles, it really humanizes them. And so the other night, Las Vegas Knights and Montreal Canadiens are playing, was game three. And Montreal sends the puck down. Marc-Andre Fleury goes behind the net to slow the puck down. And unfortunately, like you were talking earlier, those pucks, because, I mean, it's on ice, it's man made. As a former uh, Zamboni driver, I can see, little bumps here and there. So the puck did take a unique bounce, ended up between his skates, right in front of the net. There's Montreal player, puts it in the net. Game tied 2-2. We go into overtime. Vegas loses. Game four, you change your goalies. You bring in Robin Lehner. If we could play uh, armchair goaltending coaches, number one, the mental aspect of Marc-Andre Fleury letting in that goal.
Hmm.
And then number two, here comes game four. Robert Lehner is now your starter for that game. And I'm sure there's situations that we're not aware of that other youth goalies have gone through where they have one bad game, they're benched the next game. What are your thoughts if you could be number one in Marc-Andre Fleury's head and be in Robin Lehner's head? Because I'm curious on your take on that whole situation on game three,
Yeah.
going into game
Yeah.
four.
I think so I'll put myself in Marc-Andre Fleury's shoes. To be quite honest, this guy has seen it all, been through it all, done it all. I'm sure he's just like, the mistake that he made is a mistake that a lot of goalies can make. Like I said, pucks do weird things in the playoffs. You see situations that you don't see in the regular season because the pressure is so high and the players are performing at such a high level. And there's so much pressure to win that crazy things happen. Blunders happen. Like I said, pucks do weird things. So for Fleury, I'm sure it was actually fairly easy for him to move past it because it's not the first time he's given up a bad goal in a playoff game and it's cost his team. And this guy has so much experience that he knows how to manage the fallout that comes with making that mistake. It's a very helpless, hopeless feeling. There's nothing you can do to change it. And when the coach makes the decision to go with the other goalie, you have to find a way to stay positive and support your teammates because you will turn everyone in that locker room off if you mope and whine like a baby. and you cannot allow that to happen. And it was great to hear what Robin Lehner said after game 4, after he had that wonderful performance. He mentioned the relationship that he has with Marc-Andre Fleury. And do you think their relationship would be as strong as it is, if Marc-Andre Fleury moped and whined and complained and moaned like a baby after the goal he gave up? Absolutely not. No one would want to be around him. But everyone loves being around Marc-Andre Fleury, and he brings this infectious, positive, upbeat attitude to the locker room, because when he does make a mistake or give up a bad goal, he just lets it roll off his shoulder because he's been there, done that. He's won his Stanley Cups. He's just having fun, right? And that's really hard to find in a goalie that is as competitive as he is. So I think that is really important, that goalies at that level become conditioned to learn how to manage the emotions around a bad performance or a bad goal and still continue to be a great teammate and be supportive and bring the same energy and positive attitude that they always bring regardless of what's happening. So that's kind of like how I see it from Fleury's perspective, is like, it's really unfortunate. It feels terrible. It sucks. But you cannot allow that in this stage of the playoffs when everything is so crucial, important. You cannot allow it to affect the energy that you bring to the locker room. You've got to continue to be a great teammate. You have to show up to practice that next day and be competitive as hell, because your teammates rely on that competitiveness to make them more competitive too. So you do treat practices like a game. You can't go off in the corner and cry and hope people feel sorry for you. That's just not the way it works. So I think
Who's starting game 5?
That's a good question. I don't know. We'll see. I would have to think that it's probably going to go back to Fleury, but you know what? A lot of it depends on what's going on in the locker room, how the guys are feeling, the conversations. There's always so much more behind the scenes than what we see as fans. And that's something that, goalie parents and parents of any athlete need to understand. So that's a good little lesson in there, is like, there's always more that goes into it than what you see on the surface. Now from Lehner's perspective, man, this guy has just probably been chomping at the bit to at least just get a shot. And I think when you're a goalie that's as fierce, and as driven and as mentally tough as Robin Lehner, you're just chomping at the bit to get the opportunity. And let's face it, game 4 was his second game in 6 weeks, his first game in 3 weeks. And the one playoff game he did go in for was kind of a surprise, and he didn't play well. So I think when you don't play well in the one limited opportunity you get in the playoffs, all you want is just another chance to prove yourself. You want to like erase the bad performance by putting in a good performance. And a lot of credit to Lehner for being patient, trusting the process, continuing to compete in practice every day. And same sort of thing, instead of just giving up and throwing your hands in the air and being like, well, I sucked that game, I guess that's it, I'm never going to get a shot again. No, like he continued to show up. He took a few days off after that game. He didn't dress the next few games for Vegas after he had the bad performance. And obviously he did well enough in practices and waited, was patient enough to wait for that opportunity. The opportunity almost always comes when you least expect it. And I think this was the game where everyone did not expect it would be Lehner in game 4. And what did he do? He went out there and rocked it. Huge saves. Yes. He was a stud. That is why I think you look at Vegas's goalie tandem and you say, wow, what a special group, what a special tandem, what a special team. Because both goalies have this incredible resolve and this incredible mindset where they're very aware of the situation that they're in, and they're very aware of how important it is to always support the other regardless of how you're doing individually. And that's why I feel like they probably end up coming out on top, not only in this series, but all the way to the end. When you have that as a coach, when you know that you can lean on both guys and that both guys are going to support each other and get over whatever kind of flaws they see in their own egos, you've got a special group, and the players feel it too. Like, let's not forget that a lot of this impacts the players as well. And if the players feel like one of the goalies has an ego, or they're not as supportive as they should be, or they're not as competitive in practice, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna affect the players as well. And you can't have that. Everyone's got to be firing on all cylinders at the top of their game. And so that's just kind of how I kind of break down like their mindsets. And I'm sure whoever's in net tonight's going to be ready to go and have a good performance. And you better believe it, Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be way more careful when he's handling the puck behind the net if he's playing tonight.
My prediction: they go with the hot hand. They put Leonard back in. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I love these kind of situations because it really does shine a light on coaching mentality and what you need to have success in the playoffs. I definitely would not be surprised if Leonard started tonight. So it'll be really fun to kind of see what the decision is and how that goalie responds. But I think it's also good too, like when you have two goalies that you can throw in any night, it keeps the other goalie accountable as well. Like,
Yes.
nothing's guaranteed. And you want that as a coach. You want to know that like both goalies have to be ready because either one could start. It doesn't matter if you won the last game or not. Like the coach is going to turn to either guy at any given moment and say, "You're in tonight." And that's good. It keeps both guys accountable. When you've got Andre Vasilevsky starting every game, Curtis McElhinney knows that he's on the bench, right? And that can lead to some complacency. But neither goalie for Vegas is complacent, and both of them are extremely mentally tough, extremely experienced. And whether it's Fleury or it's Leonard, they're going to be ready to go. And I think that's all you can hope for as a teammate and as a coach.
Well, the good thing, the power I have is if I'm wrong, I can go back and edit, and I'll just go. I predict Marc-Andre Fleury is going
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
playing. I'm a genius.
That's
So
funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's always it's fun to like predict and project what coaches are thinking, and can always go both ways, right? Like, you can make an argument for both guys.
yeah,
And it's a tough decision, especially in such a big game when, the series is tied at 2.
my son is on your side. He thinks that Vegas is going to go back to Fleury.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I just, it was such a bad goal to give up. But honestly, besides that, he's been a stud,
yeah.
like I think his goals against average is under 2. Um, so do you really penalize a goalie like Fleury, who's got the cups and the experience, just for one bad goal? He's not hanging on to it. He's moved past it. So I would, again, it could go either way, but that's the fun of, talking about these things.
Well, we'll find out in a few hours.
Yeah.
So you have a new book with your buddy Mike Valley, The Power Within, #2.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, and you again, I'm looking at the lineup here of goalies you guys talked to. Again, my favorite, Robin Leonard, is there, but my other favorite is Connor Hellebuck, and I'm not saying that just because my son's name is Connor and spelled the
Yeah.
same way. But I mean, even Rob Tallis. I mean, Rob Tallis was no slouch. I mean, he was a great goalie for Dallas back in the day. So, what's the difference between the Power Within 1 from 2013 to this new version?